Have you ever wondered if perhaps the love that hurt you the most was exactly the one you idealized the most? And if what you call suffering is in fact a secret call toward your awakening, could it be that the wound that reached you with such precision actually knew parts of you that you had not yet discovered? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. There are pains that don't scream, they whisper. They don't leave scars on the body, but they open cracks through which the soul slips away. And if you've made it this far, maybe you know that kind of pain, the pain of having loved someone who seemed designed to fit your wounds, someone who, instead of seeing you, consumed you, someone who made you feel necessary and invisible at the same time. This is not a video about the narcissist, it's about you, the empath, that sensitive, intuitive figure that dissolves into others in the name of something we call love, but which is often nothing more than lack disguised as compassion. Here we will dive deep, not into cliches about toxic relationships, but into the depths of the unconscious, where the empath faces the cruelest mirror. The narcissist as archetype, as mythological figure that awakens ancient and sacred wounds. We will talk about transfiguration, shadow, symbolic death, and rebirth. Jung did not write of empaths and narcissists using those words, but his theory of archetypes, shadow, and individuation describes this path exactly. And it is this path that we are about to walk. Like someone walking barefoot across a field of mirrors, knowing some will cut, but others will show who you truly are. This is for the one who is tired of begging for love, for the one who gave everything and still felt empty, for the one who is finally ready to understand that healing is not about becoming who you once were, but about becoming who you always were before forgetting. Stay with me until the end, because what Jung reveals here is not only about trauma, it is about the final stage, the stage in which the empath ceases to be a victim and becomes a symbol. Have you ever felt that certain pains were not exactly caused, but revealed? Have you ever had the impression that someone entered your life not by chance, but as if sent by a force that knows no mercy? And what if I told you that what you called love was in fact an ancient ritual, an encounter between archetypes? Sometimes what we call destiny is only the language the unconscious uses to force us to grow, and in that invisible stage, few plays are as intense as the one that unites the empath with the narcissist. They are drawn to each other as if they were opposites, but in truth, they are mirrors. And mirrors, as you know, don't always show what we want to see. They show what we need to see. Jung, in his descent into the abyss of the human psyche, did not see these encounters as simple errors of judgment or emotional accidents. He saw them as symbolic activations, brutal initiations orchestrated by the self, that archetypal instance dwelling in the deepest core of our being. The self, as the regulating center of psychic totality, throws us into experiences that shatter us so that something within can awaken. The empath, by nature, is porous. They dissolve into the other as easily as wind enters a house with open doors. They don't only hear words, they hear silences. They don't only feel spoken pain, but hidden pain. That is both their gift and their curse. The narcissist, on the other hand, is a tragic figure. Not tragic in the romantic sense, but tragic like a black hole, an absence of center that devours everything around it in search of confirmation. They do not feel, they react. They do not embrace, they demand. And perhaps the cruelest part is that they promise what they never intended to give. But this union is not accidental. It is, as Jung would say, a confrontation of archetypes. The narcissist embodies the devourer, the emotional predator, the false king who lives off the energy of others. The empath represents the wounded healer, the unconscious savior, the one who believes they can love enough for the other to transform. But transformation never happens under coercion, and love does not save those who refuse to be seen. This dance almost always begins the same way: a look that captivates, a phrase that feels like destiny, an inexplicable connection that invades like fever. The empath feels they've found someone who finally sees. The narcissist, in turn, finds a refined source of emotional supply, a being who idolizes them without demanding reciprocity. Yet this encounter is deeper than it seems. It activates ancient wounds, childhood ghosts, unconscious complexes. It is as if the empath is drawn to what they once had to endure in order to survive: silence, neglect, emotional abandonment. Here enters what Jung called the inferiority complex, a psychic void the empath tries to fill by being necessary, by sacrificing. They unconsciously believe that if they are good enough, the other will love them. And the narcissist, with seductive performance, offers exactly that: the illusion that the empath is special, unique, chosen. But what seems to be an archetypal romance quickly reveals its cruel nature. The empath becomes trapped in a web of subtle manipulation, a labyrinth where love and violence intermingle, where gestures of affection are followed by brutal omissions, and where all guilt falls on the one who feels the most. It is at this point that the psyche begins to fracture. The empath becomes a faded reflection of themselves. They begin to question, to blame themselves, to beg for crumbs of presence. And the narcissist fuels that process, not out of pure malice, but out of essential emptiness. They do not see the other as a person, but as an extension. And extensions only serve as long as they function. Jung said that what we do not face in our unconscious reappears in our lives as fate. And that phrase resonates like an oracle for the empath, because that encounter was not random. It was revelation. The narcissist is the inverted mirror of the empath, a distorted reflection of their repressed desire to be the center, to be cared for, to receive, without having to save anyone. That is the secret wound of the empath. They don't only want to give, they want to be loved without effort, to be seen without losing themselves, to be the sun, not only the mirror. But admitting this feels like selfishness, like something forbidden. And so they project that desire onto the narcissist and try to heal what represents what they most fear in themselves. Here is where the script shifts, because the pain is no longer only emotional, it is ontological. The empath feels as though they are dying, not because they lost someone, but because they lost themselves, or perhaps because they never had permission to be whole. And that is the archetypal lesson. The narcissist, unknowingly, plays the role of the dark initiator. They force the empath to see themselves, to fall, to break, and if they survive, to be reborn. But rebirth is never immediate. It is preceded by the desert, by silence, by the darkness of the night of the soul. And it is there, when all seems lost, that a new voice begins to whisper. You no longer need to beg for what already exists within you. That voice is the self, the hidden center, the spark the empath tried to project onto another, the fire sought in someone else's eyes, but always dormant within their own chest. Do you feel it now? That faint vibration, almost imperceptible, that pulses when you stop chasing broken mirrors. That is the beginning of rupture, of freedom, of integration. And what follows is not the end of pain, but the beginning of the real. Now tell me, have you ever felt that you give too much and yet are not respected? It is not for lack of effort. It is because respect is not asked for. It is projected. And that projection begins with how you train your mind to remain cold and focused in critical situations. Many grew up with the idea of being good, being understanding. But that does not build strong people. It builds people who are easily manipulated. There is a model of mental self-mastery now being used by those who chose to stop pleasing and start imposing presence. The empath does not love lightly. They love excessively. They love until it hurts. They love until they vanish. They love as if the other were an altar to serve, a wound to purify, an abyss to leap into with eyes closed. But there is a cruel truth hidden in that devotion. The empath is often not truly loving the other. They are attempting to redeem themselves. And what they call love is nothing but a desperate attempt to be needed, to be chosen, to finally be seen. This is where illusion begins, because the narcissist knows it. They smell lack disguised as compassion. They recognize the pattern, the empath who needs to heal in order to feel worthy, and they offer exactly that, wounds. Wounds that never close, wounds that bleed just enough to keep the empath occupied. Jung affirmed that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And it is that darkness the empath avoids seeing within. By trying to save it in the other, they avoid it in themselves. The empath finds in the narcissist a pain that feels familiar, an empty gaze that recalls ancient absences, a rejection that resonates from deep places. And unconsciously they believe that if they manage to heal that person, if they can be so good as to melt the ice of that heart, then perhaps, finally, they will be worthy of love. But the narcissist does not want salvation. They want supply. They want adoration. They want the empath to bow before their altar of vanity. They do not seek redemption. They seek control. And the more the empath gives, the more they lose themselves. It is a cruel mathematics. Giving increases, hope grows, but the return empties. The soul of the empath becomes a house full of mirrors, reflecting only the emptiness of one who refuses to be touched. And still, they persist, because they believe true love is endurance, is tolerance, is infinite forgiveness. But that is not love. It is attachment to suffering. It is emotional addiction, disguised as spiritual virtue. It is the illusion that enduring everything is the noblest way to love. It is not. Jung taught us that true healing begins when we confront the unconscious. And for the empath, that confrontation requires facing the hidden motivation that binds them to the narcissist, the fear of not being enough on their own, the fear that if they are not saving someone, they have no worth. Here the childhood wound screams, the ancient voice that learned love must be earned, that care only comes after effort, that the silence of the other is their fault. And so the empath spends a lifetime repeating that pattern, molding, giving, erasing themselves in the hope of finally being loved. But true love does not demand martyrdom. Love should never feel like a punishment. Yet the empath confuses depth with pain. The more it hurts, the more they believe it must be true love, as if suffering itself validated the purity of their feeling, as if only those who endure everything deserve to be loved in return. And the narcissist watches, manipulates, and offers crumbs calculated to the smallest detail. And I love you only when the empath threatens to leave. an unexpected display of affection after days of coldness, a sudden compliment that rekindles hope. It becomes a cycle, subtle and poisonous, where the empath clings to crumbs as if they were divine manna, and each time they are mistreated, they forgive. Each time they are ignored, they wait. Each time they are hurt, they justify. What they do not see is that they are drowning in an ocean where the other will never reach out a hand. Jung would call this archetypal possession, when an unconscious complex takes over the personality. In this case, the savior complex hijacks the consciousness of the empath. They no longer think clearly. They no longer feel with discernment. They no longer love with freedom. They love compulsively. And within that compulsion, they begin to lose themselves. First, the voice is lost, then the boundaries, and at last, the identity. Who are they without someone to care for, without someone to rescue, without another's pain to justify their existence? That is the great illusion, believing love heals everything, when in truth, what heals is self-knowledge. The love that never returns, the love that dims you, the love that demands your silence. That is not love, it is prison. It is shadow disguised as light. And the empath must understand this before it is too late, before their own light burns out in the attempt to ignite someone who only wants to control the darkness. Salvation is not in healing the other, but in releasing the impulse to always try. Only then does the empath begin to see with the eyes of the soul, to realize that the narcissist was never a project of redemption, but a harsh, implacable, necessary lesson. A lesson that says, you are not here to save what does not want to be saved. You are here to remember who you were before you believed you had to sacrifice yourself to be loved. It is at that point where the illusion starts to collapse, not with rage, but with clarity, with the serenity of someone who, for the first time, can say, this is not love, and I no longer need it. There is a strange moment in the process of breaking away, a silence that is not exactly peace, but rather the muffled sound of a world crumbling within. The empath, after so much trying, waiting, and bending, simply stops. They do not scream, they do not accuse, they do not seek revenge, they simply fall silent. And within that silence, the awakening begins. But it is not a beautiful awakening. There is no heavenly light, no sublime epiphany. It is a raw, uncomfortable awakening, like opening your eyes in a dark room without remembering who you are, like emerging from years in the shadows and realizing the contours of the world were all illusions. Carl Jung said that the encounter with one's own soul is often a somber experience. For the empath, that encounter happens when the narcissist leaves, or worse, when they remain and the empath disappears within, because the other does not change, and finally the empath is forced to. But change towards what, if everything they knew as love, as identity, as purpose, revolved around pain? That moment is what the mystics call the dark night of the soul. It is not depression, not just sadness, but the collapse of identity. The empath discovers themselves alone, not because they were abandoned, but because they no longer recognize who they are. They look at themselves and do not know what they like, what they want, not even what they feel, because they spent too much time feeling for someone else. They lived as an emotional radar, tuned into foreign frequencies, and now they hear only noise. It is within that void that the true self begins to whisper, not with promises, not with grand revelations, but with a subtle discomfort that says, you are alive. You survived. Now listen to me. The problem is, that the empath still waits to be rescued, for the narcissist to repent, for justice to appear, for some external force to confirm that they were good enough. But no one comes, and that is the exact moment when liberation begins. Because by realizing there are no saviors, the empath stops waiting and starts digging inward, as if searching for a hidden spring beneath the soil of their own despair. Jung said that suffering must be fully felt before it can transform us, and the empath finally allows themselves to feel, without justification, without rationalization, without trying to understand the other. They feel rage, they feel shame, they feel guilt, they feel nostalgia for something that never existed, they feel fear of never being loved again. They feel everything they spent years swallowing in silence. And from that storm of emotions, a figure emerges, the true self. That self is not always beautiful, not always pure, not always compassionate. Sometimes it is cruel, sarcastic, selfish, because it is human, because it is real. And the empath who spent a lifetime adapting to be accepted now begins to deconstruct themselves to become whole. What once was fragility becomes strength. What was once a craving for approval becomes discernment. What was once fear of being alone turns into choice. But this does not happen overnight. There is no map, no guarantee, only the abyss. And within that abyss, that psychic void where the narcissist once lived, the empath begins to build a home. Not a castle of illusions, but a silent dwelling where self-love is not performance, but presence. It is here where the dreams begin to change. Jung saw dreams as messages from the unconscious, and at this stage, the empath's dreams transform. No longer of pursuit, of falling, of loss. They begin to show keys, doors, lights that do not come from outside. That is the symbol of the silent rebirth. When the pain quiets, the body speaks, the soul beats, the intuition awakens. The empath no longer seeks to heal anyone, because they realize they were always trying to heal themselves through the other. And now they understand. Healing was never outside, never in the forgiveness of another, never in their change, never in their validation. It was always in the abandonment of the illusion. In the end, the narcissist becomes irrelevant, not because the empath forgets, but because they awaken. And in awakening, they finally understand that to love is not to lose yourself, that to help is not to erase yourself, that to be sensitive is not to be fragile. It is to be brave enough to feel and still continue. This is the moment where the new being is born. Not an empath who lives through another, but a complete human being, with both light and shadow, with boundaries and devotion, with presence and discernment. And it all begins when the pain finally falls silent, and in place of waiting comes listening, listening to the self, to the soul, to the self. And the journey that seemed to have ended is, in truth, only just beginning. There is a silent, almost imperceptible scene that repeats itself in thousands of sensitive souls scattered across the world. It is the moment when the empath, tired, exhausted, torn apart, realizes that no one will ever applaud the sacrifice, that the altar where they bled for love is empty, that the other, the one they tried to save at any cost, never wanted to be saved. It is in that moment that the savior dies, and with him, the myth also dies. Jung warns us that the savior archetype hides a dangerous shadow, spiritual vanity. And in the empath, that vanity is refined, subtle, almost invisible. It disguises itself as humility, but it is the same pride, the belief that their love can transform anyone, that their care can heal even what refuses to be healed, that their presence can redeem the absence of the other, but it cannot. It never could. And admitting it is as painful as it is liberating, because the empath built identity upon that role. If I love enough, I will be needed. If I endure everything, I will be chosen. If I am perfect in giving, I will finally be seen. But that love has a cost, the soul itself. And when the empath begins to notice that the other does not change, that the suffering repeats, that pain has become a cycle, collapse occurs not only with the other, but within themselves, because the savior role begins to show itself as unsustainable. This is where the psyche begins to break secret pacts, those unconscious alliances the empath signed with suffering. I sacrifice, and in return, I will be loved. I accept pain, and in return, I will be seen. I endure abuse, and in return, I will give meaning to my existence. But the raw, cutting truth is that suffering is not a shortcut to love. It is only suffering. The empath needs to look with brutal honesty and ask, why do I insist on saving what destroys me? Why do I only feel alive when I am giving everything I have? Could it be that deep down, I am trying to save the child I once was, by healing the adult I became? This is the point where the martyr archetype must die, because the empath is not only victim, at times also manipulates, though without noticing it. They use pain as currency, silence as punishment, giving as collection, expecting gratitude, expecting reciprocity, expecting redemption. But that is not love. It is contract, dependence, a wounded ego seeking validation. Jung said that the shadow needs to be integrated, not projected. And here, the empath must find the courage to face their own shadow, to see that the desire to save the other was often a disguise to escape themselves, to see that loving too much can also be a form of control, that compulsive kindness may conceal a silenced fury. And when this is seen, when the realization comes that the savior role was a prison, something breaks. There are no fireworks, no mystical revelations, just a strange emptiness, as if a character had died inside. And it did. The character that needed to be perfect has died. The one who needed to be useful to feel worthy has died. The one who believed that loving the other was more important than self-love has died. It is a deep mourning because the empath not only loses the other, but an entire identity. Yet in that mourning begins birth. Jung described this process as individuation, the path where the ego ceases to be slave of unconscious complexes and begins to orbit around the self, the center of psychic wholeness. And here, something new begins to breathe. The empath, stripped of the savior's mantle, begins to recognize their own presence. They discover silence as source. They discover solitude as sacred space. They discover that they can say no and still be worthy of love. This is the awareness born from the death of the savior, the perception that being whole is more important than being good, that love demanding self-sacrifice is not love, it is penance. And true healing begins when saving stops and listening begins. It is not easy. The old impulse still tries to return. The temptation to give too much, to tolerate the intolerable, to believe the other will change. But now, something within has changed. There is a silent space that refuses to accept less than truth, a clarity that no longer yields to empty promises. And for the first time, the empath perceives themselves as someone who does not need to be useful to exist, as someone who can simply be. That is the true revolution, not of the savior who conquers, but of the human who awakens. Because in the end, the cycle of suffering only ends when the empath understands It is not their function to save anyone. Their function is to live with integrity, with boundaries, with presence. And if the other wishes to walk beside them, so be it. But no longer do they bend. No longer do they empty. No longer do they disappear. Pain has shaped them, but does not define them. The wound has marked them, but is no longer identity. Now they walk with another name: awareness. Not all who enter the darkness come out of it. Some are lost, others surrender, but there are those who pass through, not intact, not immune, but transfigured. The empath who survives the encounter with the narcissist is no longer the same. They do not return to what they were, because what they were no longer exists. It is not reconstruction, it is something else, as if something died inside, but from that death, something will shine. Jung would call this psychic alchemy, the art of transforming pain into awareness, shadow into wisdom, trauma into symbol. And that is precisely what happens here. The pain that once consumed now illuminates. The absence that once screamed now guides. The wound that once bled now speaks with its own voice, steady, silent. Transfiguration is not a miracle. It is a slow, invisible, untransferable process. The empath begins to move from another place. They no longer respond as before, not because they became cold, but because they became whole. They no longer need to rush to extinguish the emotional fire of others. They no longer need to prove value through effort. They no longer need to give everything to receive almost nothing. Now they know. They know their presence is enough. They know their love does not have to be suffering. They know their boundary is sacred. But there is a detail few understand. The empath did not become narcissist, did not close, did not grow cynical, simply learned to distinguish what is love from what is a broken mirror. Before, everything was absorbed. Now, they choose. They choose what enters, what touches, with whom they walk. And that choice does not come from the mind. It comes from the body, from a new inner vibration, from a peace that needs no explanation. This is the light born from shadow, not bright, visible sunlight, but the light of the cave at the bottom of the well, of the symbol that only shines in darkness. Jung describes this stage as the emergence of the realized self, the integration of opposites, the union between what we were and what we refuse to be. The empath now looks at the narcissist and no longer feels hatred, but clarity, because they understand that it was necessary, that without the encounter with shadow, they would still be trapped in characters, still be the savior, still begging for crumbs. The narcissist, unknowingly, was the initiator, the dark portal, the crucible, and the empath was the alchemist. They passed through symbolic death, dissolved, and relearned to be. Now they feel compassion that does not annul, forgive without forgetting, love without losing themselves, and help without extinguishing. That is the mark of the true healer. Not the one who heals to be loved, but the one who heals because they are whole. The transfiguration is also physical. The body changes. The eyes become calmer, the voice softer, the silence deeper, and others perceive it. They feel it. Some move away, others draw near, but the empath is no longer hostage to the reactions of others. They observe as one who sees the world for the first time, without the fog of lack. And then the dreams change. Jung saw in dreams the map of the unconscious, and now the dreams show gardens, circles, open doors. That is the image of transfiguration. The empath becomes a flower among ruins, a flame that resisted the wind, a symbol of something that cannot be extinguished. And most beautiful of all, They do not consider themselves healed, do not believe themselves superior, do not glory in it, because they understand that true healing brings humility, not pride. They know they can still fall, can still be deceived, but now there is an anchor, a center, an axis, the self, the voice that says, "You are," even if no one sees you, even if no one chooses you, even if everything collapses. You are, and in that being the empath finds freedom, no longer as reflection, but as source, no longer as martyr, but as presence. He crossed the mirror and discovered that on the other side there was no one else. It was himself, whole, improbable, unbreakable. In the end, it was never about the narcissist. It never was. It was about you, about how much of your light you surrendered to illuminate the path of someone who never intended to walk beside you, about how much of your soul you reshaped just to fit into a love that always demanded more, but never returned the essential reciprocity. The empath who reached this point is no longer the same one who entered this labyrinth. He carries scars, yes, but they are sacred marks. They are inscriptions carved into the psychic flesh that declare, "You went through the darkness and you did not lose yourself." Carl Jung said that individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. And now, perhaps for the very first time, you are no longer trying to please, to heal, to conquer, or to deserve. You are simply being, and that in itself is sacred. The shadow is still there, but you know it, and because of that, it no longer frightens you. The narcissist may appear again, but now you recognize the pattern and you smile, not with arrogance, but with awareness. You already dance that dance, and you do not need to dance it again. That is the real end of the road, not when the pain disappears, but when it no longer dominates you. You are no longer the reflection, you are the flame. I had to live this in order to write these words, and I confess, it took me years to understand that I never needed to keep saving the one who was drowning me. There was one night in particular. I was alone after another empty conversation, another painful excuse, another drop of hope shattered on the floor. I sat on the bathroom floor, and for the first time, I did not cry for anyone else. I cried for myself, for everything I had forgotten to feel, for everything I endured in the name of a love that never truly existed. There, on the cold floor, I heard a silence, but it was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of the self, whispering, "Enough." This video is my way of reaching out to those who are still at the bottom of the well, not to pull them out, but to tell them, you can climb out, and when you do, you will not be the same. Thank you for making it here. Thank you for allowing these words to touch something inside you. If it touched, if it hurt, if it resonated, then perhaps you too are ready to let the Savior die and allow the true self to be born. Now I am going to break the fourth wall. You there, empath, in the middle of the night, with the light of your phone shining on your face, thinking this was just a video. Know this, it was a ritual, and you just crossed a portal. Going back is now difficult, but moving forward will hurt less. So leave a comment below. I am no longer the reflection. I am the flame. Just so we can recognize each other in the crowd. Give this video a like if it hurt you in a good way. Share it with that person who still has not understood that to love does not mean to extinguish oneself. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, do it now before the narcissist returns under another name. In the videos appearing here on the screen, there are more mirrors, but be careful. Some show who you are, others show who you have not yet dared to become. Go. The journey did not end. It only changed form. Life is a constant dance between the image we present to the world and the person we truly are inside. But how often do we actually stop and listen to that quiet inner voice that speaks to us in moments of doubt and stillness? Carl Jung taught us that real transformation begins the moment we stop running from our inner world and begin to face it with honesty and courage. And maybe, just maybe, you felt this yourself, an unshakable sensation that something in your life just doesn't feel right. It's that persistent feeling that perhaps you're chasing goals that don't genuinely belong to you, that you're living under the rules and expectations crafted not by your own hands, but by those of others, society, family, past versions of yourself. If that strikes a chord with you, know this: you're not alone. That discomfort you feel isn't a flaw or a mistake. It isn't something to hide or suppress. It is, in truth, a message, a calling, an invitation to come back to yourself, to reconnect with that part of your soul that may have been buried under fear, conformity, or the endless pursuit of approval. Carl Jung described this disconnection as the root of many inner conflicts that plague us. According to him, we all carry within us a shadow, a hidden side of ourselves that we'd rather not acknowledge. It contains everything we've rejected, denied, or felt ashamed of. But here's the paradox: within that shadow lie the seeds of our greatest gifts. They are like locked chests, and while opening them may be unsettling at first, doing so reveals not only our deepest fears, but also our most powerful talents, our truths, and our purpose. But to unlock that inner richness, we need more than bravery. We need willingness to look inward. And this, without sugarcoating it, is not an easy path. To confront our shadows means to face those aspects of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden. It means admitting that many of our decisions may have stemmed from insecurity, fear of rejection, or a desperate need to fit in, instead of being guided by authenticity or love for ourselves. Yet, within this very act of confronting lies profound liberation. Because once you embrace these rejected parts of you, you stop being controlled by them. You stop reacting to the world from a place of emptiness or pain, and begin to respond from a space of inner completeness. Imagine how different your life could be if you stopped hiding from your fears and instead faced them like a warrior, ready not to destroy them, but to understand and integrate them. That is the promise Jung offered us. He believed that by integrating our shadow, we don't become perfect. We become whole. We become real. We step into a fuller, truer version of ourselves. But how do we begin this integration? How do we even start to identify what lies in the shadow? The first step is to pay close attention to the subtle signs, to the recurring emotions, to the patterns that seem to follow us, no matter how many times we try to change our outer lives. The unconscious doesn't speak in words, it speaks in images, in feelings, in synchronicities that repeat until we finally look inward. Perhaps you've noticed that certain situations or people consistently trigger strong emotions in you. These are not coincidences. They are windows, opportunities to ask, what is this experience trying to teach me about myself? Take a moment to think about someone who irritates you deeply. According to Jung, that irritation could be a projection, your unconscious mind reacting to something in that person that mirrors a part of yourself you haven't accepted. Maybe that person's arrogance, their boldness, or their carelessness reflects a trait you've buried within yourself, something you were once punished for expressing. Instead of brushing those emotions aside as mere annoyances, what if you began to treat them as clues, as sacred signposts, pointing you toward hidden truths about your own psyche? The journey begins with self-knowledge. And I'm not talking about surface-level awareness of what hobbies you enjoy or what your favorite foods are. I'm talking about the deep, uncomfortable self-inquiry that asks, what really drives me? What holds me back? What inner narratives am I repeating to justify why I'm not yet living the life I want? This level of truth-telling requires radical honesty. It demands that you stop blaming others for your circumstances and begin taking full responsibility for your life. Jung believed that the outer world is a mirror of the inner world, which means if something isn't working out there, in your relationships, your work, your goals, the first place to look for answers is in here. Not in the people around you, not in new circumstances or fresh distractions, but in how you relate to your own self. Because as you start to understand and transform your internal world, something magical happens. The outer world begins to shift as well. The right people show up. Opportunities begin to align. But more than anything, you begin to feel a sense of peace. Not because everything has become perfect, but because you have changed the way you engage with life. And that, right there, is the real power of this inner work. It frees you. It frees you to live not from a script written by others, but from the truth that has always lived inside of you. When you start to truly listen to yourself, you realize that the answers you've been searching for were never outside. They've always been hidden underneath the noise, beneath the distractions, waiting in silence to be heard. But let's be honest, this path isn't glamorous. It's not an overnight fix. It's a long, slow journey of returning to yourself. It takes time. It takes dedication. And above all, it takes courage. Because confronting your shadow means facing the uncomfortable parts of your past. It means unearthing painful memories, challenging long-held beliefs, and coming to terms with truths that you've spent years avoiding. Yet, despite its difficulty, this is the most worthwhile journey you'll ever take. Because on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. On the other side of those shadows is light. Not the blinding external kind, but the kind that glows from within. A steady, unshakable light that comes from knowing who you are, embracing all of yourself, and living in alignment with your truth. So if you've ever felt lost, disconnected, or like a stranger in your own life, take it as a sign that it's time to go inward, time to explore what you've avoided, time to reclaim your power, not by becoming someone else, but by finally allowing yourself to be who you've always been. Carl Jung teaches us something profoundly revolutionary. Our shadows are not our enemies. They are not demons to be vanquished, nor monsters to be suppressed. Instead, they are parts of ourselves that have been hidden, neglected, misunderstood. Yet they are powerful allies, waiting to be embraced. These shadows hold within them the very essence of what makes us whole. They are containers not only of our fears and unresolved pain, but also of our untapped potential, creativity, passion, and inner strength. Jung believed that the path to authenticity lies not in denying these darker aspects, but in acknowledging them, confronting them, and ultimately integrating them into our conscious lives. Think about this for a moment. Every time you suppress a difficult emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, envy, or fear, every time you reject a part of your personality that doesn't fit the expectations of society, your family, or your inner critic, You are building a wall between who you are and who you pretend to be. This wall might give you a sense of safety, of control, even of social acceptance. But over time, it becomes a prison made of your own denial. And this internal divide doesn't just separate you from yourself, it separates you from life itself. Have you ever felt that something essential is missing, even when everything appears to be going well on the outside? Maybe you have achieved success, met your goals, or fulfilled your obligations, and yet there's a hollow feeling, a void that no external achievement or possession can truly fill. That emptiness is not a defect, it's a signal that your true self is longing to be seen, to be heard, and to be reintegrated. Jung saw this disconnection as one of the core issues of modern existence. We live in a world that glorifies productivity over presence, appearances over authenticity, compliance over courage. We're taught to conform, to obey, to smooth out our rough edges, and to always keep it together. But in doing so, we stray further and further away from our essence. We become strangers to ourselves, actors in a performance that never ends, wearing masks to survive in a society that fears the rawness of the human experience. The problem is that you cannot live a fulfilling life while rejecting parts of who you are. It's like trying to fill a leaking container. No matter how much love, validation, or success you pour into it, it will never be enough if the holes of self-denial remain open. The solution, then, is not to chase more from the outside, but to begin the inner work of healing. And that healing begins with the courage to look within, to turn toward the very parts of yourself you've been taught to fear or feel ashamed of. When you begin this process of shadow integration, when you shine a light into your own darkness, something truly transformative begins to happen. You start to feel whole again. You no longer have to waste energy hiding your insecurities, masking your flaws, or pretending to be someone you're not. Instead, you begin to embody a deeper kind of authenticity, one that is grounded in self-acceptance, resilience, and truth. And that authenticity becomes contagious. It affects how you connect with others, how you navigate challenges, how you love, and how you are loved in return. Now imagine, just for a moment, what your life could be like if you allowed yourself to be fully and unapologetically you. Imagine a life where you no longer feel the need to hide your fears, silence your dreams, or minimize your vulnerabilities. A life where you stand rooted in the truth of who you are, not just your strengths, but also your flaws, your past, your wounds. That kind of life is not only possible, it's waiting for you on the other side of self-acceptance. This is the heart of Jung's work. It is not a path of perfection, but one of integration, a journey toward wholeness. It's about learning to live in harmony with the contradictions within you, to recognize that you can be both strong and fragile, both wise and wounded, both afraid and brave. Embracing this duality is what makes us human. And when we stop striving to be perfect and instead choose to be real, we discover a freedom and a peace that no external success can provide. This process, however, requires tremendous honesty. It asks you to suspend judgment and approach yourself with compassion, curiosity, and tenderness. Because the truth is, we all carry shadows. Every single one of us. We all have fears we don't speak about, insecurities we try to hide, old wounds that never fully healed. But we also carry light. We carry dreams, strengths, wisdom, and beauty that the world desperately needs. And when we allow those aspects to coexist, When we bring our light into our darkness, and our darkness into the light, we unlock a power within us that is transformative. In that moment of integration, we stop seeing ourselves as broken. We stop fighting against our nature. We stop hiding behind masks, and we begin to experience something rare and profound, a sense of inner peace that cannot be disturbed, a sense of freedom that comes not from escaping ourselves, but from embracing all that we are. And that ultimately is a choice to stop running, a choice to stop searching for fulfillment in all the wrong places, a choice to come home to yourself. And yes, this journey is not easy. It is not linear. There will be discomfort, resistance, and moments when you'll want to turn back. But with every step you take toward your own truth, you'll find that life begins to open up in ways you never imagined. You will start to notice something remarkable. The patterns that once held you captive, the toxic relationships, the self-sabotage, the chronic doubts, they begin to unravel. The weight of pretending falls away. The cycles of frustration lose their grip. And it's not because the world suddenly becomes easier or more forgiving. It's because your perspective changes. Your awareness expands. You begin to see things as they are. And more importantly, you begin to see yourself as you truly are. And from that place of wholeness, of clarity, of radical self-acceptance, you are free to create a life that reflects your deepest truths. A life not built on fear, but on purpose. Not on perfection, but on presence. A life where you are no longer at war with yourself, but finally at peace. Carl Jung spoke about the importance of individuation, a journey in which you stop defining yourself based on what others expect from you and start becoming who you truly are. Individuation isn't a destination, but a path. It's a continuous process of self-exploration and self-discovery, where you allow yourself to evolve and grow without clinging to the labels or roles that have been imposed on you. One of the most powerful aspects of this journey is reconnecting with your intuition. Jung believed that the unconscious is always trying to speak to you, not through words, but through symbols, emotions, and synchronicities. That unexplainable feeling you get when making an important decision, that inner sense that tells you you're on the right track or need to walk away from something. That is your intuition. And the more you connect with yourself, the stronger that inner guidance becomes. Intuition is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more reliable it gets. But to hear it, you must quiet the external noise. We live in a world that bombards us with opinions, expectations, and distractions. If you don't take the time to disconnect from all of that and listen to what you truly feel, it's easy to get lost in the chaos. That's why Jung emphasized the importance of introspection. Taking time to reflect and be with yourself isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. On this path, it's normal to face resistance. Maybe you've spent your entire life trying to meet others' expectations, following a path you didn't really choose. Suddenly realizing you can choose a different path can be terrifying. But here's the secret. True freedom lies on the other side of that fear. Fear is nothing more than a sign that you're about to grow. Jung said, "There is no awakening of consciousness without pain." And although that might sound intimidating, it's also deeply hopeful, because it means the pain you're feeling right now isn't punishment, but a sign that you're evolving. You're letting go of parts of yourself that no longer serve you to make room for something new, something more authentic. This process doesn't just transform your relationship with yourself, it also changes how you connect with the world around you. When you begin to live from your true self, you attract relationships that mirror that same depth and honesty. The people who once drained your energy begin to drift away, and in their place come those who inspire and support you. Jung strongly believed that our relationships are mirrors of our own psyche. The people we encounter, whether positive or challenging, are there to teach us something about ourselves. That's why, instead of blaming others for our problems, it's important to ask, what can I learn from this experience? What part of myself is being reflected in this situation? In doing this, you take control of your life. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the creator of your reality. That doesn't mean everything will be easy or perfect, but it does mean you'll have the power to face any challenge with a new perspective and an inner strength you didn't know you had. When you reconnect with yourself, you discover that you don't need to control everything around you. That need for control, which is often just a response to fear, begins to fade when you realize that real security doesn't come from the outside world, but from your relationship with yourself. Jung invites us to trust the process of life, to understand that even the most difficult moments have meaning, if we're willing to learn from them. This is where the concept of synchronicity comes to life. According to Jung, synchronicity is how the universe responds to our intentions and inner state. Have you ever had an experience where things seem to align almost magically? Maybe you met someone at exactly the right time, or found an unexpected solution to something that had been troubling you. These aren't coincidences. They're signs that you're aligned with your truth. But to experience this alignment, you must be honest with yourself. You can't pretend you're at peace while battling your own fears. You can't attract authentic relationships if you're not being authentic with yourself. Jung reminds us that the universe is a mirror. What you project outward is what you receive. That's why inner work isn't just a tool for personal growth. It's also the key to transforming the reality you experience. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Perfection is an illusion that only creates more anxiety and disconnection. Instead of chasing it, Jung encourages us to embrace our imperfections as part of what makes us human. It's in our vulnerability that we find true strength. When you allow yourself to be who you are, without masks, you open the door to deeper, more meaningful relationships. This process of self-acceptance is liberating, but also challenging. It requires facing not just your shadows, but also the limiting beliefs you've carried for years. Maybe you grew up believing you weren't good enough, that you had to try harder to be loved or accepted. These beliefs, though painful, are not the truth. They are stories you learned, and now you have the power to rewrite them. Jung believed that once we identify these inner stories, we gain the power to transform them. It's not an easy process, as it requires unlearning what we've accepted as truth for so long. But every step you take toward that transformation brings you closer to your essence, closer to that version of yourself that is free from the chains of the past. A key element in this journey is the power of letting go. Letting go of what no longer belongs to you, of what no longer resonates. It can be terrifying because it means leaving behind the familiar, even when the familiar doesn't make you happy. But Jung teaches us that in letting go of the old, we create space for something new to bloom. It's an act of faith, a reminder that the universe always responds to our choices. Think about the times you've clung to a relationship, a situation, or even a sense of identity that no longer served you. Maybe you believed that letting go would mean failure, that you needed to try harder to make it work. But what if instead you had trusted that letting go wasn't giving up? It was an act of self-love. When you choose to let go, you send a clear message to your unconscious. I deserve better. And that one decision has the power to change your life. When you release what no longer serves you, the universe starts to respond in surprising ways. That is the power of living in alignment with your essence. You begin to attract people, opportunities, and experiences that mirror your authenticity. Not because life magically transforms overnight, but because you've shifted your energy and your focus. Jung described it as an alignment between the conscious and the unconscious. It's a balance that allows you to act from your truth instead of reacting from fear or insecurity. This balance doesn't mean you'll never face challenges again. Life will always bring moments of uncertainty and pain, but what changes is how you meet them. You no longer view obstacles as punishments or failures, but as lessons, as chances to grow and to deepen your connection with yourself. Every experience, even the most difficult ones, becomes a stepping stone toward a fuller version of you. A central insight in Jung's work is the understanding that true power isn't found in controlling the external world. It's in mastering your inner world. That doesn't mean ignoring your emotions or repressing your fears. It means learning to face them with compassion and curiosity. Every emotion you feel, every thought that passes through your mind, is a clue that helps you understand yourself better. Imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you could live with that level of inner connection. If every decision you made came from your intuition rather than your fears. If every relationship you nurtured was built on authenticity, not the need for approval. This isn't some unattainable ideal. It's a real possibility, but it requires action. It requires a commitment to yourself. One of the greatest gifts of this path is clarity. When you know yourself, when you integrate your shadows and reconnect with your intuition, you begin to make decisions from a place of certainty. You no longer second-guess everything because you know who you are and what you want. And that clarity doesn't just benefit you, it lifts the people around you. You become a beacon, someone who inspires others to also become their best selves. Jung said that the purpose of life is not superficial happiness, but wholeness. Happiness is fleeting, dependent on external conditions that you can't always control. But wholeness, that feeling of peace with yourself, of living in harmony with your truth, is something no one can take away from you. It's the result of deep, consistent inner work, a gift you give yourself every single day. To reach this state of wholeness, it's important to surround yourself with people who support your growth. You can't thrive in a toxic environment or around people who constantly make you question your worth. This doesn't mean you have to cut ties with everyone, but it does mean becoming aware of how relationships affect your energy and well-being. Jung reminds us that we are reflections of the people we spend the most time with. If you want to live in alignment with your truth, you need to surround yourself with people who are also committed to their authenticity. In the end, this journey isn't just about you. It's a path that, as you walk it, transforms those around you. When you live from your truth, you invite others to do the same. You become a living reminder that it's possible to live a fulfilled life, even in a world that constantly pressures us to be someone we're not. Your courage to be yourself sets off a ripple effect that goes far beyond your personal journey. As you go deeper into this path toward authenticity, you begin to realize that life's true purpose isn't about finding some magical formula to be happy, but about discovering who you really are and living from that place of inner wholeness. We are not here to settle for what the world expects from us. We're here to create a life that reflects our deepest truth. Along the way, it's natural to face moments of doubt. There will be days when you wonder if you're doing the right thing, if all the effort is truly worth it. But I want you to remember this. Every small step you take toward yourself is an act of love. Every time you choose to listen to your inner voice, every time you decide to release something that no longer serves you, you're sending a powerful message to the universe. You're saying, I'm ready for something better. I'm ready to live in alignment with my truth. That's when synchronicity begins to show up more often. Those small daily miracles, those unexpected connections, those seemingly perfect opportunities, they're not coincidences. They are the natural result of living in alignment with your purpose, of acting from a place of authenticity. And the more you trust this process, the clearer your path becomes. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is learning to trust in who you are, to believe that the answers you seek are already within you, simply waiting to be heard. Jung believed the unconscious holds an infinite wisdom, one that is always trying to lead you toward your wholeness. But to access that guidance, you must learn to quiet the external noise and tune into your inner signals. Society has taught us to fear the unknown, to avoid chaos, to always seek security. Yet Jung shows us that chaos isn't something to be feared. It's a place of creation, a space where the old falls apart so the new can emerge. When you choose to face that chaos, instead of running from it, you uncover a strength you never knew you had. You discover that you're not broken, that you don't need fixing. You only need to remember who you truly are at your core. This is the moment to take control of your life, not from a place of struggle, desperation, or pressure, but from a space of deep acceptance and trust. It's time to understand that you already carry within you everything you need to create a life filled with meaning, a life that inspires you and fills your heart with purpose. You don't need to become someone else, chase perfection, or wait for some external force to give you permission. The truth is simple, yet powerful. You are ready. Right now, in this very moment, you are enough. But here's the catch. This meaningful life you long for will not arrive while you sit on the sidelines, hoping someone else will come along and deliver it to you. It won't magically appear through luck or coincidence. It's your responsibility. It's your right. And more importantly, it's your gift. You have the power to shape your own story, to direct the narrative of your life in a way that aligns with who you truly are. Imagine waking up every morning knowing, with absolute certainty, that your actions, your choices, your relationships, and your goals are all reflections of your truth. Imagine how empowering that would feel, to live with such clarity and alignment that every step you take feels like a declaration of who you really are. There is no greater freedom than that. There is no deeper joy than to know you are honoring your soul's path. That kind of life is not a fantasy, it's a possibility. But it begins with you. Right now, I want to invite you to do something powerful, something simple but transformative. Pause and reflect. Look honestly at your life. Ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? What dream? What truth? What desire have I silenced out of fear, doubt, or the comfort of routine? What version of myself have I hidden away just to fit in or avoid change? And then, make a decision. You don't need to change everything overnight. This is not about grand gestures. It's about taking one small step, one single decision that moves you closer to the life you truly want to live. Because every step counts. Every small choice in the right direction builds momentum. It brings you closer to the version of yourself that's been waiting to be seen, heard, and lived. This is your moment. Life doesn't wait, and neither should you. There's a force within you, an energy, a voice, a knowing that is ready to awaken. It's ready to guide you to something greater, something more real, something that finally feels like you. Listen to it. Trust it. Let it lead you. And take that first step. Remember what Carl Jung once said. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. This is your moment to awaken, to stop searching out there and begin the most important journey, the one within. Because when you do, you won't just transform your own life. You'll change the world around you. And that, my friend, is the sign you've been waiting for. That is the invitation. Not to fight or resist, but to take control of your life with love, with clarity, and with purpose. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for choosing this path of transformation, growth, and self-discovery. Your presence, your willingness to do this inner work is not just powerful, it's necessary. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to remember something vital. Change begins with you. It always has. But the effects of your inner change ripple outward. Your courage to live authentically becomes a mirror for others. Your decision to align with your truth gives others permission to do the same. That's the true power of reconnecting with who you really are. You don't just illuminate your own path. You become a beacon for others. You become the proof that it's possible. You become the reason someone else believes in themselves again. Now is your moment. You hold within you everything you need to take back the reins of your life and start living it from a place of wholeness, meaning, and deep inner peace. But this doesn't end here. This message, these words, have the potential to spark something powerful, not just in you, but in others. And what if you were the bridge? What if you were the one who helped someone else find this message? Someone who needs it just as much as you did. Maybe a friend, a family member, or even a complete stranger who's quietly waiting for a sign, a spark, a reminder that it's not too late to begin again. That's why I'm inviting you to act, not just for yourself, but for all those who are still lost in silence, who haven't yet found the strength to choose themselves. Be the messenger, be the light, and most importantly, be the change. If this message resonated with you, share it. Help it reach more people who are also seeking answers, who might be in need of a sign to awaken and take control of their lives. Together, we can build a community where knowledge, authenticity, and growth are the foundations that bring us together. Let me know in the comments how this message touched your life. Which parts inspired you the most? What steps are you willing to take to reconnect with yourself? Your story doesn't just add value to this conversation. It might be exactly what someone else needs to take their first step toward transformation. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any upcoming videos. This is only the beginning. There's so much more to share, explore, and discover together. Every time you interact with this content, whether by commenting, liking, or sharing, you help spread this message even further to more hearts that are ready to awaken. Life is a journey, and today is the day to take a step toward your truth. You have the power to create a life filled with meaning and purpose, and the power to inspire others to do the same. Thank you for being part of this community, for choosing to listen, and most importantly, for choosing to grow. See you in the next video. Remember, change begins with you. See you soon. There are moments in life when everything you used to understand begins to dissolve. The world stops speaking to you in the languages you once knew. What once made sense now feels hollow, like an echo in an empty room. Words no longer suffice. The gestures that used to convey meaning lose their power. The familiar ways of relating to the world no longer move you as they once did. Carl Jung spoke of symbols as the true language of the soul. And when that symbolic language begins to rise to the surface, everything else turns into noise. You're not losing connection with the world. You're learning to connect from a different space, a different frequency, a different code altogether. You begin to sense that words no longer reach you, neither to express yourself nor to understand others. You try to articulate what you feel, but each sentence feels like a leak. Something important escapes every time you speak. What lives inside you is so vast, so subtle, so deeply intimate that language fails to contain it. And when others speak to you, you sense the gap. What they say doesn't always match what they truly feel. It's not that they are lying, but rather the shared language has become too limited for the depth of perception you now inhabit. You find yourself understanding more through silence than through conversation. A look, a breath, a fleeting gesture carries more weight than 100 well-constructed sentences. And you're not trying to make it happen, it just does. Your body picks up on it before your mind can even process. It's as if a more ancient part of you knows how to read the unsaid, how to hear what carries no sound. This apparent disconnect from external language is not a loss. It's the beginning of a more authentic form of communication, one that doesn't require translation, one that comes from the core. Even when it feels like no one truly understands you, you know you're not disconnected. You're starting to connect on a different plane, the plane where souls recognize each other without a single word. And the sensation that words are no longer enough doesn't leave you in silence because you're empty, but because you're overflowing. What you feel is too deep, too complex, too nuanced for ordinary speech. You try to name it, to explain it, but the moment you do, something essential slips away. It's as if words were too small a container for the vibration that now lives within you. And that's when the new language begins to reveal itself, a language that doesn't rely on grammar, but on resonance, one that isn't spoken from the throat, but emitted from your energy field, a language that isn't meant to convince, but simply to reflect. You realize that a shared silence can be more intimate than 1,000 confessions, that a subtle gesture can open more space for trust than hours of conversation, that the energy someone carries speaks more honestly than any story they could ever tell. Carl Jung believed that every true psychological transformation involves a shedding of the old languages of the self. And you are exactly there, releasing the linguistic structures you once relied on, stepping into a new way of connecting that doesn't come from outside, but rises from within. It feels like you've remembered something ancient, that before you could speak, you already knew how to communicate with the world, with a glance, with a sensation, with your frequency. And while it may have been confusing at first, you felt awkward, misplaced, disconnected. Now, It's beginning to make sense. It was never disconnection. It was transition. You are crossing the threshold between the known form of expression and the vibrational truth of feeling. You no longer need to explain everything you feel, because when you are in the presence of someone who has also begun to awaken to this new language, there's nothing to explain. You simply feel. You recognize. Even in old relationships, you've noticed the shift. Some connections now feel exhausting, while others are made of silence that feels like home. You've learned to tell the difference between those who listen with their minds and those who listen with their soul. And now, you only open yourself fully to the latter, because you're not looking for mental understanding, you're seeking resonance. This new language doesn't argue, doesn't need responses, doesn't aim to be right. It simply emits a frequency, one that touches without touch, one that guides without direction, one that transforms without a single word. And you have begun to embody that frequency. You've begun to hold it, to radiate it. And even if it still feels unfamiliar, even if you sometimes feel alone in this new mode of communication, you know, deep in your bones, that it's more truthful than anything you've ever known. Because in this new language, you don't exchange ideas, you share vibrations. And when the vibration is coherent, everything else falls into place naturally. As this new way of communicating settles into your being, something even deeper emerges. You're no longer trying to be understood. You want to be felt. And that changes everything. Understanding is a mental task. It's limited. It's fragmented. Feeling, on the other hand, is total. It happens in the body, in the soul, in the energy. You, who once felt the need to explain every emotion, justify every choice, translate every thought into digestible words for others, now simply want to be, without needing to label what you are. You no longer need to form perfect phrases. Your presence alone is enough. And that presence isn't passive. It's a vibration that speaks even when your lips are closed. It is a form of communication that doesn't need volume, doesn't aim to impress, doesn't try to persuade. It is pure coherence. It is presence becoming language. You begin to notice how, in certain situations, your body knows what to do before your mind does. It knows when to approach, when to withdraw, when to open, when to close. Not because you learned these signs in a book, but because you are remembering a way of communicating that comes from the soul. It's not something you study. It's something you awaken. It's not something you force. It's something you allow. And as this awakening unfolds, you start perceiving others in new ways. Words no longer confuse you. You see the mismatch between what someone says and what they actually radiate. You no longer get lost in a kind tone if the vibration underneath is evasive. You're no longer seduced by narratives if the person's energy field is closed. That clarity doesn't make you cold. It makes you honest. And from that honesty, you now choose what to connect with and what to release. Not out of judgment, but out of resonance. You no longer make an effort to maintain connections where the vibrational language is absent. Because now you know, when two souls no longer speak the same energetic language, the language you now recognize, any attempt at connection becomes exhaustion. Carl Jung said that the soul transforms through symbols, not definitions. And you have begun to read symbols, not with your eyes, but with your energy field. Symbols are everywhere, in subtle pauses, in uncomfortable silences, in changes of tone, in unexpected distance. You no longer need to interpret everything. You just feel it. And from that feeling, you choose. You now speak to the world the way you would speak to a river, listening to its currents, not its surface. To those who still communicate from the surface, you might seem strange, unpredictable, maybe even incomprehensible. But that's okay, because you didn't come here to be understood in the old language. You came to embody a new one that is not spoken, but vibrated, one that is not written, but felt. And you now are part of that new language, not as a student, as a channel. Sign number 2. You are starting to relate to others in an entirely new way, not based on what they say, but on what their energy communicates. Something within you has shifted. You no longer evaluate people solely by their words or by how well they present themselves on the surface. What now matters most to you is the resonance, the vibrational frequency they carry, the invisible truth that their presence either sustains or contradicts. It has become increasingly difficult for you to maintain connections that are based only on appearances or polite conversation. You've realized that your relationships have become more selective, not because you're judging others, but because your energetic needs are evolving. There's a deeper necessity guiding you now, and it doesn't come from the intellect. It's rooted in your energy field, in your soul. You've found that no matter how well someone speaks, no matter how kind they seem, if their energy does not align with yours, the connection simply does not flow, and you can't force it. In the past, maybe you stayed out of obligation, out of habit, or to avoid making others uncomfortable. You might have tolerated situations that weren't aligned with your essence, just to be polite or keep the peace. But now, something within you naturally resists those dynamics. It's not that you're trying to distance yourself. It's that your nervous system, your energetic body, can no longer tolerate what lacks coherence. There's an intuitive part of you that closes off when the presence of another doesn't feel grounded in authenticity, peace, or truth. It's not a mental decision. It's not strategy. It's your soul responding at a level much deeper than logic. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the integration of the total self, and it feels like you've stepped into that process. You're beginning to understand that real unity, real connection, can only happen when there's truth on both sides. You're starting to see that the most profound conversations don't always require words, that sometimes a single, serene glance can carry more meaning than 1,000 well-constructed sentences. You're drawn more to the presence of someone who can sit in silence with you than to those who talk endlessly just to avoid their own discomfort. You are now deeply moved by clean, honest energy, far more than by rehearsed speeches or perfect expressions, and this has created a natural purification of your connections. You can no longer thrive in spaces where the connection is only mental, where emotions are faked or forced, or where interactions remain on the surface. Instead, you're choosing to be around people who speak through their energy, whose presence confirms the truth of their words. You now require congruence between speech, action, and vibration. You're no longer willing to share your presence in places where you can't also bring your soul, your body, and your entire energetic self. You're no longer chasing intensity. You're seeking truth. And real truth doesn't need noise to be heard. It only needs to be felt. This shift in how you relate to others isn't coming from a desire to be spiritually advanced or from any external pressure to evolve. It's happening naturally. It's like a forgotten part of yourself has awakened and is now guiding you back to what's real. You've felt it in your own body, in your skin. You can't pretend anymore. You can't stay where there is no authenticity. not because you're rejecting anyone, but because your energy field simply doesn't collaborate with anything disconnected from its own truth. You've come to see that the language of energy is raw and honest. It can't be rehearsed. It can't be photoshopped. It can't be manipulated. And now, your soul, tuned into this new frequency, can no longer be deceived by appearances. You've begun to see, with quiet clarity, who carries their light from within, and who only projects it outward for others to see. You've noticed that relationships that once felt intense now feel noisy. People who once gave you comfort now leave you feeling drained. Externally, nothing may have changed, but internally, your frequency has transformed, and that shift is restructuring your relationships in ways you can't ignore. You no longer force conversations that lack soul. You no longer fill silences out of politeness. You no longer pretend to care just to seem presentable. You've learned to honor the silence that tells the truth over the words that try to hide it. You now crave company that allows you to breathe peacefully, even if no words are exchanged, rather than being overwhelmed by empty stimulation. And yes, that may have led you to create distance from people you still love. But you've come to realize that it's not emotional distance, it's vibrational realignment. You haven't stopped loving. You've just begun loving from a different space, a subtler, freer, more conscious frequency, one that can't be forced, one that can't be faked. Even in new encounters, you've started to notice something remarkable. Before your mind even forms an opinion, your energy scans the room. Within seconds, you sense whether it's safe to open up or if you need to protect yourself. And again, this isn't about judgment. It's about vibrational recognition. You no longer offer yourself from a sense of duty. You only offer yourself when there's resonance, when something inside you says yes without hesitation. Carl Jung also spoke of the importance of living from the whole self, not just from the mask. And that's what you're doing now. You're no longer interested in engaging with personas or projections. You respond only to that which vibrates from the soul. And this way of connecting doesn't have a name. It's quiet. It's peaceful. It doesn't require conflict or explanation. It just is. Because now you understand something you didn't fully grasp before. True connection is born when two souls recognize each other in silence. And anything that doesn't arise from that sacred space, it isn't connection. It's just noise. Sign 3. Your body has started to react as another channel of the subtle language you're learning. You no longer feel just with your soul. You feel with your chest, your skin, your stomach, your breath. You've noticed how your body responds before your thoughts, as if it's speaking in physical codes you never learned but instinctively understand. A sudden tension, a warmth in the chest, a brief shiver, an unexpected expansion. These no longer feel like symptoms, but messages. You're no longer disconnected from your body. You're more deeply inside it. And in this new way of inhabiting yourself, your body has become an instrument that reads what cannot be seen. Carl Jung understood that the unconscious expresses itself through the body, and now you're beginning to realize that this language doesn't need rational translation, just presence. You felt how some people drain you without speaking a word, how certain places make you sleepy or close your chest, and at the same time, how other presences soothe you just by being near, how some spaces open your breath as if bringing you back home. Maybe before, you ignored it. You thought it was just tiredness, anxiety, coincidence. But now you know better. Now you know it's your body saying yes or no, and you listen Because your body doesn't lie, and this new sensitivity hasn't made you fragile. It doesn't lie. This new sensitivity hasn't made you fragile. It has made you coherent. You no longer force yourself to stay in places your body wants to leave. You no longer normalize tensions you used to tolerate out of politeness. You no longer sacrifice your well-being just to please others. You've come to understand that your body isn't a container, it's a channel, and every sensation isn't an obstacle, it's a guide. And even though this language can be uncomfortable, because it makes you leave spaces your mind wanted to stay, you follow it, because you know that when you listen, something aligns within, and when you ignore yourself, everything falls out of order. You're starting to understand that your body, in its subtlest form, also connects you to the invisible, and that level of connection can no longer be shut off. And that connection with your body isn't just physical, it's vibrational. You no longer inhabit it as mere moving matter, but as a tool of energetic precision. Every pulse, every micro shift, every sensation has become a silent form of wisdom. And that wisdom doesn't need explanation, it just needs to be respected. You've begun to see how your body anticipates things. It knows before you do whether a place will uplift or crush you. It knows whether a conversation will nourish or exhaust you. It knows whether a glance is sincere or hiding something. And instead of ignoring it, you've learned to trust those signals that once seemed subtle, but are now your primary language. Sometimes you stop midway and don't know why. Your chest just tightens, or tension in your neck tells you not to go that way, or you feel instant relief walking into a house, even if you can't explain it. And then you know, not because you think, but because you feel. Carl Jung said that body, soul, and psyche are not separate. And now you're living that truth, vividly, for real, in the flesh. Your body is now the first receptor of the energy around you. You no longer need arguments to leave a place that makes your body tense. You don't need justifications to stay where your body expands. How certain tones of voice unsettle you, how certain pauses calm you, how certain silences feel like home. And it's not coincidence, it's vibration translated into physiology. It's energy translated into sensation. It's your soul speaking through your body, guiding you when words fall short. And that guidance, though invisible, is precise. It's intimate. It's accurate. So much so that you no longer need anyone else to understand. If your body tells you, you believe it. If your body feels it, you honor it. If your body pulls away, you don't force it. You've stopped hurting yourself to please others. You've stopped ignoring yourself to fit in. You've stopped betraying yourself just to belong. Now you know that your body doesn't just hold you. It protects you, guides you, takes care of you. And that relationship, that sacred bond between you and your body, has become one of the purest forms of connection you've ever known. Because before, you searched for answers outside. Now, you feel them within. And that change has changed everything. Sign 4. You've become more attuned to symbols, signs, and subtle messages that you used to overlook. You start noticing patterns, coincidences, repeated phrases, numbers that follow you, and synchronistic events that defy logical explanation. It's not obsession. It's not superstition. It's sensitivity. Your energetic field tuning into a new language that life has started using to speak to you. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, events with no apparent causal connection, but with such precise meaning that they can't be ignored. You've begun to experience that precision, not as fantasy, but as a tangible way in which the universe responds when you're ready to hear from a different level. You encounter the right words at the right time, songs that feel like they were written for you, random meetings that trigger deep inner shifts, and symbols appearing just as you were about to give up. And you can no longer call that chance because something within you knows it isn't. You've realized that life doesn't only express itself through external events. It also speaks through inner impressions, and often that connection occurs through the invisible, the vibrational, the symbolic. You no longer seek signs to validate your mind. You recognize them through vibration. Even in chaos, you've learned to sense subtle clues that tell you when to move forward, when to pause, when to let go. No one tells you. You don't decide it rationally. You just feel it. And when you follow that feeling, everything aligns. The more you embrace this symbolic sensitivity, the more present you become. You no longer live on autopilot. You're not disconnected. You're attentive, not from a controlling mind, but from a listening soul. And that has completely transformed the way you exist in the world. Your perception of symbols isn't driven by a desperate search for meaning. It's a vibrational openness that's settled in you without force. You're not interpreting from need. You're recognizing from the soul. What once seemed like mere coincidence now feels like a personal, intimate language meant only for you. And you don't need to fully understand what each sign means, because you've realized not all signs come as riddles to be solved. Some simply arrive to support you, to remind you, to silently walk with you, to say, you're on the path, even if you don't know where it leads. You've stopped begging life to speak loudly. Now you hear its whispers. You read between the lines. You see the invisible. Sometimes it's a word overheard while walking by, a phrase on a sign just when your heart was about to shut down, an animal crossing your path right before an important decision, a book someone casually suggests, unaware that inside it lies exactly what your soul had been searching for. And you no longer dismiss it as random. You take it as sacred communication. Carl Jung understood that symbols are a gateway to what the mind cannot fully grasp. You've begun to live in that symbolic realm, where everything has a deeper echo, where the outer world reflects the inner, not to trap you in obsession, but to remind you that you're not separate from life's rhythm, that you're part of something wiser, softer, more accurate than any plan you could ever make. Even in moments of confusion, you've stopped asking for guidance out of desperation. You ask from presence, and something always shows up. Not always what you expected, but always what you needed. This way of connecting has replaced many of your old ways of praying, asking, or planning. You're no longer trying to control life's flow. You're learning to move with it. And in that dance, life speaks to you, in symbols, in synchronicities, in silences full of meaning. And you've remembered how to listen, without needing proof, without demanding guarantees, just from an open soul that recognizes when something is meant for you, even if you can't explain why. You've stopped searching for signs to confirm your plans. Instead, you let the signs reveal a path more honest than any your mind could invent. A path that isn't always easy, but it's real. And now you know how to feel when something is real, not because you understand it, but because it resonates, because it settles in you as if you've always known it, because in some way you already did. And as you open more to this symbolic language, you realize you're not just a receiver, you're a transmitter too. Your own energy begins to send signals to others, even when you say nothing, even when you're not aware of it. As though by fine-tuning your sensitivity to life's messages, you become part of the message yourself. And then you see it. You're not just reading the universe. You're in dialogue with it. Life no longer feels like a sequence of events happening to you. You feel it as a living field responding to your inner state. When you close off, the signals fade. When you open, they appear, as if they'd been waiting for you. Not because you force them, but because you allow them. And in that invisible dance, you begin trusting the subtle more than the certain. Resonance more than rigid plans. Inner guidance over external maps. Even on days that feel stuck, you sense movement inside, an intuition, a sudden memory, a feeling you can't explain, but that clearly shows you the way, and you follow it. Not with anxiety, but with a newfound softness, with the surrender that comes from knowing life doesn't need to shout to guide you. Sometimes it only takes a vibration. Carl Jung said, "Everything that deeply impacts us in the outer world has an archetypal root within." And you've started recognizing those roots. What you see outside is no longer foreign. It's symbol, it's mirror, it's echo. And the more honest you are with yourself, the louder that echo becomes. That's why when you disconnect from your truth, everything becomes blurry. The signs scatter. Intuition dims. The path feels heavy. But when you return to yourself, to your center, everything realigns, like the whole world breathing in sync with you. You no longer live waiting for miracles. You live recognizing them. In the smallest details, in the inner rhythms, in the messages that come when your soul needs them, not your mind. And you've learned to know the difference. Now you understand you are not alone, not lost, not drifting. You're in constant dialogue with a greater intelligence, one that doesn't impose but whispers. And at last, you've remembered how to listen. Sign 5. You no longer feel the need to build authentic connections. They are simply recognized. You've stopped trying to make everything fit together. You're no longer interested in forcing bonds, in convincing others to understand you, or in reshaping yourself just to be liked or accepted. What you're drawn to now is something far more subtle, more intimate, something that cannot be explained or logically constructed. You search for a resonance that doesn't arise through effort, but rather appears spontaneously, in silence, in stillness, something that is not thought, but felt, a connection that does not require time to grow, because it does not come from time, it comes from the soul. And when that kind of connection happens, you know it, not because the other person says the right things, not because their opinions mirror your own. You know it because something within you aligns, effortlessly, because there is a vibration, an unspoken harmony that finds you, as if it had been searching for you just as long as you had been searching for it. Carl Jung once spoke of the collective unconscious, a shared space where souls touch beyond what our eyes can see, where truth travels without sound and understanding emerges without explanation. You've begun to experience these connections. They're not logical. They don't follow the usual rules of time or story, but they leave their mark on you, deeply. There are relationships you cannot explain how they began, yet they feel as if they've always been part of your life. Brief encounters that echo louder than years of history. Glances that don't need to be interpreted because they are instantly understood. And just as you've learned to welcome these connections, you've also learned to accept when that resonance simply isn't there. You no longer take it personally. It doesn't feel like rejection anymore. It's not something to mourn. It's just a quiet knowing that energy isn't flowing there. And that means There's no need to insist, because now you understand something profoundly simple. If you have to force the connection, then it's not a connection, it's a strategy. And you no longer live from strategies. You no longer operate from effort. You live from truth, from energy, from intuition. This new language of connection has taught you to love from freedom, not from need, to be present without suffocating, to hold without possessing, and to let go without creating drama. You've stopped craving relationships that look perfect. You've stopped idealizing partnerships that check boxes. You now seek what is real. And the truth, in this new language of the soul, doesn't require explanation. It only needs to be felt. This way of connecting, one that no longer strives to build through control, but rather recognizes through energy, has brought you a peace you didn't even realize you were missing. You no longer chase bonds that appeal only to reason, because now you understand that the most meaningful connections aren't understood. They are remembered. And when you remember, there's no doubt, no confusion, no inner debate, just certainty. But not the kind that comes from the mind, the kind that comes from the soul. A certainty that feels like something returning home. Not because the other person is just like you, not because they give you everything you ever wanted, but because their energy doesn't compete, doesn't perform, doesn't pretend. And you, who have stopped negotiating your sensitivity, recognize it immediately. You don't need promises. You don't need a mapped-out future. You just need that vibrational honesty that makes the present moment enough. You've released the belief that relationships must be built through forced consistency or constant verbal validation. Now you know, when the energy is real, it doesn't require maintenance. It sustains itself, and when it isn't, no amount of effort can salvage it. Carl Jung also said that the meeting of two authentic people always activates something transformational. And you have started to experience those meetings. They're not always easy, they're not always comfortable, but they always bring you back to yourself. And you've learned to recognize when a cycle has come to an end. You no longer drag out what no longer vibrates. You no longer cling to what has become heavy. You no longer wait for someone to stay when their soul has already left. Because you now understand what is real cannot be held. It must be honored. And when it leaves, you give thanks for what it was. Even solitude no longer feels like a void. Now it feels like a sacred place, a chamber of tuning, where you refine your own energy, preparing for the next connection, not to be just another noise in your life, but a shared melody. You've stopped searching for someone to complete you. Now, you long to share yourself with someone who has also found themselves. And if they haven't arrived yet, you don't fall into despair, because you trust that the language of life will bring together those who vibrate at the same frequency. At the exact moment, both are ready to truly listen, not with their ears, but with their hearts. That truth no longer demands explanations. It simply asks for coherence. Now, you connect with those who truly feel you, not those who try to interpret you, with those who listen without defending themselves, with those who are not afraid of silence, because they've come to understand that silence is also a profound form of love. This is the new kind of connection you're beginning to recognize. It's not hurried, it has no particular form, but when it arrives, it transforms everything. And now that you've felt this, now that these signs have begun to stir within you, you may finally understand. You are not disconnecting from the world. You are tuning yourself. You are learning to listen differently. to feel from a deeper place, to recognize a language that no one teaches, but that your soul has always known. Life has never stopped speaking to you. It has only changed the way it communicates. And you are finally ready to hear it. Thank you for allowing this message to vibrate within you. Thank you for holding on to your sensitivity, even when the world hasn't known how to name it. Thank you for recognizing that the invisible speaks too, and that you are beginning to understand its voice. If this message resonated with you, if something deep within you was touched by the truth, then I invite you to stay, to follow this path. A path where the soul remembers what the mind had long forgotten. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself if what you feel is love or simply the fear of not being chosen? Do you truly long to connect, or do you just need to feel seen so you won't disappear inside yourself? And what if what you call passion is nothing more than the muffled cry of the inner child who once learned to beg for affection? Almost no one truly wants to love. Almost everyone only wants to be loved. That phrase, in Carl Jung's light, is not just an observation, it is an exposure, a wound in the way most of us were conditioned to exist, as if our worth could only be revealed when an outside voice confirms it. You can call it love, you can call it desire or connection, but underneath there is an echo whispering, "See me, please choose me, validate me, prove I am someone." Perhaps you are tired of repeating stories, of begging for emotional crumbs, of losing yourself in the effort to be desired, tired of feeling that with every new, almost something, you walk away with less of yourself. And yet you continue like an addict, like someone who does not truly want love, but only another dose of illusion. This is not a comforting embrace. It is a dirty mirror, a descent that few dare to make. But if you've come this far, it's because part of you already knows. There is something wrong with the way you love, or rather, with the way you try not to disappear. Prepare yourself. We are about to open scars you swore were already healed. We will visit the forgotten childhood, the denied traumas, the fantasies you call romance. Here, love will be stripped of all poetry to reveal the addiction beneath. You say you want to love, but when you close your eyes, when no one is watching, do you truly want to love another? Or do you just want to be chosen, as if that would finally make you real? Most people do not love. They need to be loved. They are thirsty, but not for water. They are thirsty to be seen, to receive the gaze of someone silently saying, "You matter, I see you, I choose you." And that is not love. That is desperation. From childhood, we learn to put ourselves to the test, to smile, to please, to get good grades, to behave well, to apologize for existing too much. And deep inside, we record the following logic. If I am enough, I will be loved. If I am beautiful, intelligent, funny, useful, desirable, someone will choose me. And so broken adults are born. People who do not want a relationship, they want walking approval. People who do not seek love, they seek to feel that they are enough. And that, my dear, is an emotional addiction disguised as romance. Have you noticed how everything revolves around the other? You dress so they will notice you. You answer quickly so you won't be forgotten. You erase yourself, mold yourself, force yourself to fit into someone's desire. But it is never about the other. It is about the emptiness you feel inside. It is about silencing that voice that screams when you are alone. It is about taming pain with borrowed affection. Carl Jung taught that real love can only begin when we stop seeking to be loved and learn, instead to love from our own wholeness. But how can you love if you are still trying to prove you deserve to exist? How can you love if you only know the sensation of being chosen as proof of worth? You think you need a relationship, but what you want is anesthesia. You want someone to rescue you from the inner chaos you refuse to face. And that is not love. That is escape. Do you remember the last time someone ignored you? That unanswered message, that sudden disappearance? Do you remember how it crushed you inside, as if your existence depended on the other's reply? That is not about them. It is about the fact you cannot hold yourself up without the crutch of validation. Culture does not help. We live in a society that romanticizes lack. Films, songs, social media, all selling the idea that true love is what completes us. But that is a trap, because if you need to be completed by someone, you are admitting you are incomplete. You do not love, you need to be chosen. And when you are, you feel that relief. For a few minutes, everything seems to make sense. The anxiety quiets, the body relaxes, the world appears more beautiful. But then it returns. It always returns. The emptiness, the doubt, the sense that everything can collapse with one absence, one silence, one shifted look. You live on the edge of collapse. You have built your worth on quicksand, and the mere wind of another can destroy you. True love cannot grow from that place, because love does not arise from urgency. It arises from presence, from your capacity to be whole, even when no one chooses you. Yet you are still trapped in the idea that loving is being chosen, and that prison is comfortable. It is painful, but familiar, suffocating, yet known. You already call it home. But what if I told you this is not a home? It is a cell, the unconscious repetition of an ancient wound. Your longing to be loved is the wounded child within you, trying to prove they deserve to exist. Let's go one step deeper. Let's listen to that child. Let's visit the root of the emptiness you try to fill with glances, with praise, with temporary presences. But for now, breathe, feel, and if you have the courage, write in the comments, "I do not need to be chosen to exist." That phrase may seem small, but for someone who has spent a lifetime begging for affection, it is the beginning of freedom. And now there is something you must understand. The most dangerous enemy is not outside. It lives in your mind. That impulse that makes you explode, that anxiety that paralyzes you, that emotional attachment that weakens you from within, all of it follows a pattern. And unless you restructure the mental model that creates it, the cycle will repeat endlessly. But there is a way to change that foundation with clear logic, strategic awareness, and deliberate emotional retraining. There is something in you that never grew, something still waiting for an embrace, for an "I see you" spoken through the eyes, for a stay that comes without conditions, for a "you are enough" that demands no effort, performance, or sacrifice. You may be 25, 40, 60 years old. You may have lived through 1,000 relationships. You may have children, achievements, even healed traumas. But that fragment, that small being inside you, is still waiting. It is not love it craves, but something more primal. Safety, belonging, a validation free of demands. You may have never stopped to notice how much you are still being guided by that child. That child does not speak. It cries in silence. It shows up when someone ignores you, when someone abandons you, when someone says no. Suddenly, you collapse, as if you were 5 again. You say you're fine, but inside, you are pleading, "Please choose me. Please stay. Please tell me I matter." And then comes the most painful question of all. When did you first learn you had to earn love? Was it when your cries were ignored? When you were told you were only good if you achieved? When affection arrived only as a reward for good behavior? Or perhaps when you realized that even though your parents were physically there, they were too far away to truly see you? You grew up trying to be acceptable. You learned to smile when you wanted to cry, to please when you wanted to scream, to become invisible so as not to disturb. And so you internalized a belief. If I'm not enough, I'll be left. And they did leave, didn't they? Maybe not physically, but emotionally. They were there, yet not truly there. They heard you, but didn't listen. They touched you, but didn't feel you. And so you grew with a hole, an emotional emptiness no presence could fill. You became an adult, yet emotionally remained an orphan. And that orphan still lives within you, trying to buy love, with effort, with care, with sacrifice, as if at some point in the past, someone had taught you, be useful and maybe someone will stay. Carl Jung, though not using the term inner child, described with uncanny precision how the experience of separation is one of the deepest human wounds. Where does it begin? In childhood, in that moment when the infant realizes the breast may not come, that the arms may not hold, that touch may not be safe. When that happens, an invisible wound is formed, a silent fracture that grows and infiltrates all future relationships. And that wound shapes everything. How you love, how you give, how you protect yourself. You think you're in love with someone, but in reality, you're begging that person to fill the void your parents left. You think you're looking for a partner, but deep down, you're seeking a figure who will say, you're not alone. But no one can give you that now. No one can go back in time and do what wasn't done. And as long as you keep trying to relive your childhood within your adult relationships, everything will collapse. You will love too much, give yourself too soon, give more than you have, and break when the other doesn't come to save you. Do you know why? Because you don't want to love someone. You want someone to take care of your wounded child. But that is your responsibility. You must stop expecting someone else to heal a trauma they never caused. You must stop projecting that childhood hunger onto every new love. You must stop kneeling emotionally before any crumb of attention. You must, for the first time, look inward. Look at that child. Look with compassion and truth, without demanding it vanish, without treating it as weakness. You will see that it does not want much. It only wants to know you will not abandon it again. That this time, someone will stay, someone reliable, someone whole, and that someone is you. Because as long as that inner child keeps begging for affection behind the curtain of your life, you will keep creating fragile, intense, and destructive relationships. You will keep confusing affection with survival, care with oxygen, presence with cure, and no human being can carry that weight. People don't leave because you love too much, but because you demand they fill something only you can fill. The love you crave is not love. It is anesthesia, sedative, escape. But the child within you no longer needs to run. It only needs to be embraced, not by a partner, not by a perfect relationship, but by you. And perhaps for the first time, you will realize you no longer need to be chosen, because now you can choose yourself. And by doing so, you begin to break the cycle, to break the pattern, to finally grow. You feel that shiver when the notification arrives. The heart races, the mind fantasizes. Maybe now you will be seen. Maybe now you will be chosen. Maybe at last someone will say, even silently, you are worth it. But then comes the drop, the waiting, the disappearance, the doubt, and you crumble like a castle built on likes. You don't want love. You want to be desired, to be remembered, to feel your presence matters. And with every absence, every glance that doesn't linger, every scene without reply, you feel yourself disappearing a little more. This is not mere lack. It is addiction, an emotional addiction to attention, to confirmation, to those brief spikes of self-worth the other gives you, often without even knowing. We live in an age where being desired has become the new currency of existence. The logic is simple. If no one desires me, then I am invisible. And invisibility hurts more than loneliness, because loneliness is a state, but invisibility is a sentence. It's as if the world tells you, you don't matter. Carl Jung foresaw this even before social media. He wrote that most people believe love is easy, that the hard part is finding the right person to love or be loved by. But what this truly reveals is our inability to look within. We want to be loved without understanding why we need it so desperately. We want to be desired without realizing that deep down we are trying to silence the shame we feel for simply existing. You recognize yourself as someone who is always meeting someone new, always excited about the beginning, always idealizing the next encounter, the next match, the next intense exchange. But curiously, it all ends the same way. You, empty, drained, feeling you gave too much, felt too much, lost too much. This cycle is no accident. It's a symptom of a psyche that linked another's desire to your emotional survival. You need to be desired not because you want to love, but because you need proof you still have value. It's like a chemical addiction. The first compliment is the drink. The unexpected message is the dose. The touch is the drug. And when the source dries up, the withdrawal is brutal. Self-worth plummets, the body goes on alert, the mind starts begging, what did I do wrong? Why am I no longer wanted? How can I be more desirable? And so, the performance begins. You shape yourself, become more pleasant, more interesting, more mysterious, more of everything except yourself. Love becomes an act, desire a currency, and without noticing, you are already prostituting your own soul for acceptance. The culture does not help. We live in a system that sells desire as value, that disguises lack with filters, that turns affection into algorithm. You post, you wait, you get likes, and for a few seconds, you feel alive. But it's all artificial, because it is not you who is being seen, but the marketable version of you. And the more you depend on that, the further you drift from any possibility of real love. Because love demands presence, wholeness. It demands you be with yourself without the constant need to prove your worth. But the validation addict cannot be present. They are always scanning the room for the next sign of approval. They don't listen. They react. They don't feel. They measure. And everything the other person does becomes a mirror. If they desire me, I'm worthy. If they ignore me, I'm worthless. Do you see how much this enslaves you? You are not free to love. You are conditioned. And all conditioned love is a facade, because it is born not from the wish to share, but from the urgency to be confirmed. And the cruelest part, the more you need to be desired, the less you feel worthy of real love. Because deep down, you know they don't truly know you. They love the version you created to be loved, and that hurts deeply. So you run. You change people, faces, stories, but the pattern repeats because the addiction remains. And there is only one way out: to admit you are hooked, to admit that someone else's desire became your drug, to admit that somewhere in your history you learned you had to be desired to exist. But now you can unlearn. You can start again. You can endure silence without collapsing. You can be ignored without disappearing. You can exist even if no one is watching. And this is the beginning of freedom, the first step toward real love. Love not born from hunger, but from abundance, from overflow. But before you get there, you must break the illusion. Stop romanticizing dependence. Stop calling lack intensity. Stop confusing passion with addiction. And maybe today is that day. The day you stop everything and say, I don't need to be desired to exist. Repeat it until you believe it, until you feel it, until one day you no longer wish to be desired, but to be understood. Not to be chosen, but to be respected. Not to be the object of desire, but the subject of your own love. Have you ever felt that you're only alive when you're with someone? That you can only breathe when you feel you belong? When you're clinging, melting, dissolving into another body, another mind, another affection? You may think that's love, but here's a brutal truth. What you call love is often a desperate attempt to disappear from yourself. Carl Jung would say, this isn't affection, but a form of addiction, an ancestral hunger that has nothing to do with connection and everything to do with escape. Escape from yourself, from the emptiness, from the silent pain that throbs when you are alone. You want someone, but not for who they are. You want the anesthesia they represent. You want relief. You want the silence inside your mind. You want the shutting down of the self, because as it stands, it hurts too much to inhabit. So you give yourself away, dissolve, reshape, disappear. Stop being one and try to become two in one. But that symbiotic fusion is not love. It is regression. It is an unconscious return to the womb, to that state where there was no separation, no lack, no pain. You want someone to hold you so tightly your pain disappears. You want a gaze that defines you, a touch that heals you, a presence that saves you from the abyss of being with yourself. But here's the problem. No one can save you from that. No one can bear to be someone's remedy forever. Sooner or later, the person you idolize, the one you turned into a home, a refuge, a relief, will fail, will be absent, will say no, will need space, and you will feel like you're dying because deep down, you're not seeking them. You're seeking relief from being you. Jung would say, this fusion may seem like love, but it is not. In symbiotic love, two people become one, but neither remains whole. It's not an encounter, it's a disappearance, a relationship where each demands the other fill their emptiness until both suffocate. You say, I gave my all, but what you did was vanish. You stopped being you to become what the other needed or what you thought they wanted, and over time, that destroys you. Because no one can sustain a relationship where they must be everything all the time. You start to drown, to feel small, dependent. Yet you can't leave, because without them, the emptiness reopens. They are the wall holding your pain in place. While they're there, things seem under control, but when they step back, even a little, your inner structure collapses. You panic, obsess, create stories. They're leaving. They're tired of me. I ruined everything. You overcompensate, give more, yield more, erase yourself more, all to keep them close. Not out of love, but out of emotional survival. This is not rare. It's the story of millions who cannot tell love from fusion, passion from desperation, connection from dependency. The truth is harsh. When you seek someone to complete you, you're not seeking love, you're seeking medicine. and no one should be the pharmacy of your soul. You must stop expecting the other to be your home, your mirror, your sedative, your meaning. Because as long as you place that weight on them, love will always hurt. It will always be that love that begins in euphoria and ends in exhaustion. That love that feels like a movie at first, but turns into a nightmare. You must understand, the other can overflow with you, but never fill you. If someone can complete you, it's because you see yourself as incomplete, and that is your responsibility. Symbiotic fusion is, at its core, a way to reject solitude. But true solitude, the silent one that confronts you with your own emptiness, is the only path to real love. Because only those who can stand in silence can love without demanding. Only those who have faced their own darkness can see another with clarity. Emotional maturity begins when you can say, I don't need to merge with anyone to exist. You can still love, still give, still be vulnerable, but no longer as an escape, no longer as a patch, no longer as a crutch. True love does not erase, devour, or dissolve. It finds two whole beings who look at each other and choose to walk side by side. Not because they need to, but because they want to. If you felt pain reading this, it's a sign you are ready to let go of what you called love, but was only anesthesia. Let's speak of true love, the love born not from emptiness, but from abundance, overflow, and the freedom of no longer needing to be chosen. You've spent your life waiting for that gaze that says, it's you, hoping someone would finally fill the void that's lived in you since childhood. You tried with smiles, with sex, with silence, with sacrifices. You shaped yourself so much that sometimes you don't know who is behind the mask they call you, all in the name of a desire that looked like love, but was only hunger. Hunger to matter, hunger not to be abandoned, hunger to be enough. But maybe now you're tired. Tired of the repetition, tired of the exhaustion of loving to be validated, tired of giving yourself only to receive back the echo of your own emptiness. That tiredness is sacred. It's the sign of change, the moment when you finally understand, I don't want to depend anymore. I want to overflow. Yes, there is a love not born from lack, a love that doesn't scream, demand, or beg, a love born of silence, self-knowledge, the meeting with your own shadow, and the brave choice not to project it onto anyone else. This love isn't euphoric, it's serene. It doesn't blind, it illuminates. It doesn't erase the other, it reveals them. Carl Jung taught that love, like any art, requires practice, discipline, and patience. But who today is willing to cultivate it? Who will love without using the other as an emotional crutch? Who is ready to love with presence instead of haste? Overflowing love begins with a radical act, the decision to stop running from yourself. You sit with yourself, face your wounds, your lack, your fear of abandonment. And instead of finding someone to soothe it, you commit to caring for it. You stop asking another for what your parents couldn't give. You become the adult your inner child needed. And then something changes. Love stops being a desperate attempt to complete yourself and becomes an extension of your wholeness. You no longer seek someone to save you. You seek someone to share the silence with, someone to walk beside without editing yourself, someone who doesn't need to prove anything because you have nothing left to prove. This love isn't smaller for being calm, nor weaker for being gentle, nor dull for not being obsessive. It is full, born from a heart that no longer bleeds, from a soul that no longer crawls for crumbs, from a being who has already chosen themselves. You will still feel pain, absence, the old urge for validation. But something in you will have shifted, because now you know you are whole. They may leave, and you will still stand. They may ignore you, and you will still know who you are. They may reject you, and you will still love yourself. Love is no longer the search for someone to see you. It is the sharing between two who have already seen themselves. It is when "I need you to be happy" transforms into "I am already happy, but if you wish to walk with me, it will be beautiful." This is the love that does not bind, does not suffocate, does not require you to change, to be worthy. It is the love that celebrates who you are, not who you pretend to be. But to reach this place, you must die. Die to the belief that you must be chosen. Die to the idea that love is a rescue. Die to the childish desire to be completed. And be reborn as someone who no longer begs, no longer trades their soul for attention. To be reborn is to declare, "I am my own home, and any love that arrives will be welcome, but it will not be my refuge, because I no longer dwell in absence." You still love, but now you no longer need it to survive. And only then, paradoxically, will you be ready to live a true love. You do not want love. Perhaps it still hurts to hear that, I know. But if you've come this far, it means you've had the rare courage to face something almost no one dares to admit. That behind many of the "I love you" once said, there was really a silent cry. See me, choose me, save me from myself. And that's okay. The truth is, almost all of us were taught to beg for love while calling it devotion, to extinguish ourselves while disguising it as passion, to become dependent while selling the illusion that love is self-sacrifice. But it is not. Now you understand, don't you? You see that you were mistaken, that you built your affections on a fragile foundation, the need to feel validated, and you called that hunger connection. You thought you needed the other person, but what you truly needed was yourself, your own gaze inward, your own embrace, your own recognition. And that is liberating, because now you no longer have to plead, you no longer have to send messages that humiliate you. You no longer have to become interesting enough to deserve company. You no longer need to measure the worth of your existence by the reaction of someone who barely knows you. Now, you can finally exist for yourself. You can stop running, you can stop acting, you can let go of the character of the desirable person you created to survive, and simply be, just be. That, my dear, is the beginning of another kind of love. A love that doesn't burn, but warms. That doesn't consume, but sustains. That doesn't demand, but embraces. That is not born of desperation, but of stillness. Most people will never reach this place. They will go on confusing anxiety with passion, absence with rejection, presence with worth. But you are changing that. You now know that those who love to avoid disappearing are only clinging to another to avoid sinking. But those who learn to float alone, those can choose to love without losing themselves. And perhaps, after dimming your own light for so long just to fit in, you will finally understand that love is not the place where you vanish. Love is where you remain whole, sufficient, quietly strong. Perhaps it won't be easy. Perhaps you will still stumble, still desire, still idealize, still build illusions. But with each fall, something inside you will remember. I do not need this. You can love, yes, but not from lack, not from fear, not from addiction. You will love because you no longer need to be loved to exist. If you have ever wondered how some people manage to cultivate that unshakable mind, a state of inner stillness that no person, no event, no storm can disturb, then know this: They didn't simply stumble upon it. They acted. They made choices in moments when the easier option was to remain in their old patterns. And if you feel the pull to step into that same steadiness, the path is already open for you. You'll find the first step waiting in the description or in the pinned comment. But it's not always there. It's available only for a short time, because certain doors are not meant to stay open forever. I could end this video with a polite, "Thank you for watching," but that would feel far too small compared to what has just happened between us. Because if you're still here, you didn't just watch, you went through something. You were not a passive observer. You felt. You saw yourself reflected in the words, and perhaps in a moment so subtle no one else would notice. A quiet tear slid down your cheek. Maybe you were sitting alone, in the dim light of a room, where no one really knows you, where your silence has become your only witness. But for a few minutes here, in this strange space, between two souls separated by a screen, you were seen. And since we are already speaking truths, let me offer you one I have never said aloud. For many years, I too mistook the void for love. I threw myself into relationships that started like wildfires and ended in cold ash. Not because the other person was cruel or unworthy, but because I was absent from my own life. I confused being noticed with being cherished, instant replies with genuine connection, fleeting glances with the safety of belonging. And every time someone walked away, it felt as if the ground beneath me collapsed into nothing. Yes, I was addicted to validation, but I disguised it. I called it passion. I dressed it up as beauty, almost as something poetic. Until one night, when the rest of the world was silent and only my inner noise remained, I finally understood. I didn't want to love. I wanted to be rescued. And that, whether we admit it or not, is never fair. Not to the other person, and certainly not to ourselves. But it takes time to see this. Time to stop reciting the same script with different actors. Time to realize that the real wound was not caused by the absence of others, but by the absence that had always existed inside me. The truth is, I was a stranger to myself, searching for home in someone else's hands. And no one, no matter how gentle, how devoted, can carry that weight for you forever. It was only when I stopped waiting for someone to arrive and save me, and instead began building a home within myself, that everything shifted. I no longer begged for scraps of love. I no longer shaped myself into whatever I thought would please another. Instead, I began to give love, not as a transaction, not as a desperate attempt to secure a place in someone's life, but simply because it overflowed from me, without demands, without fear, without bargaining. If you have felt something stir inside you as you listened, if an old wound you never named suddenly found its voice, then this moment has been worth every breath we've shared here. Before I leave you, I have two invitations. The first is simple. Write in the comments, "I choose myself." Just 3 words. But maybe, for the first time in your life, you will mean them entirely. Let them be an oath to yourself, a declaration that you will no longer abandon who you are. The second is this. If you feel you need more truths like this, more nights where words strip away the illusions, more conversations that place a blade to the lies you tell yourself, then don't pretend you'll find that depth by accident. That subscribe button below isn't just a meaningless click. It's a small rebellion. It's a signal to the universe and to yourself that you are done feeding on the shallow affection the world throws at you, that you are ready to dive into the currents of your own mind, to face your shadow, to wander into the parts of your soul you've been taught to avoid. The algorithms of this world are designed to keep us skimming the surface. But here, together, we dive. We dive into the mind, into the shadow, into the unlit corners of the human spirit, the places most pretend don't exist. And before we close, I'll leave you with two final thoughts. The first, another video will appear on the screen in a moment. But be warned, it may speak to the very truth you've been running from your whole life. Click only if you are ready to meet yourself there. The second, if you've stayed with me until now and still haven't liked this video, maybe it's because you're still waiting for a sign, for someone else's love, for permission to act. But here, we don't wait to be chosen. Here, we move first. We choose first. So if you're ready, act with intention. I'll see you in the next abyss, or perhaps in your very first overflow. With respect, with presence, and with a touch of madness, I take my leave for now. But know this, what we touched here today, it remains. It follows you. And if you let it, it will change you.